So, just the other day, one of my locals asked an interesting question on our Discord. Andrew asked, what are some cards that were hyped up during a preview season and then fell completely flat after release? It's a good question. And you know what? This guy is full of great questions, such as, flicking a Tyvis sounds fun as well. Disgusting. I'm planning on coming. Scandalous. There was a video with horror recently, and one of them let me find it.
Nice.
Okay, now I realize none of the things I just said were questions, but barring that, we got ourselves a modern day Shakespeare over here. So yeah, that got me thinking. What are some cards that were already crowned king before the full set even released? What cards disappointed us so much that we can't even speak their name lest we cast ourselves into a pit of despair? What cards had the same career trajectory as a Ryan Leaf, DeMarcus Russell, and Darko Milicic? Actually, is Darko apt here? I mean, the dude won a ring his rookie year, right? I mean, I guess he got carried? It would be really funny, though, if one of the cards that I name in here was part of a tournament-winning deck, but, like, literally did nothing the entire tournament. Now, initially, I was just gonna list the cards here in no particular order, because, look, if you rank something, anything really, if you rank toilet paper or HDMI cables, someone's gonna have an opinion about it. It's just gonna happen. It's just gonna happen. And if your opinion doesn't fit their opinion, then they're gonna treat it like it's a direct attack on them as a person. And I actually didn't want to do that. That's some bad energy. It creates discourse. I didn't want none of that bad juju. But then I got thinking, discourse might also compel people to go down into the comments to write some crazy shit. And hey, whether those comments are positive or negative, YouTube is gonna see all these comments and regard it as top tier engagement, push this video way up the algo. So actually, the biggest thing you guys can do to hurt me is to actually not comment at all. Don't type anything. Don't type anything. Because you see, I've already accounted for that. Yeah, big brain time. Because, check it, if you don't comment, then you're just gonna be sitting there stewing and seething as I explain to you why Stern Leonis is the weakest card ever printed. And you got no choice. You got no choice but to sit there and take it. You can't upvote, you can't downvote, you can't comment unless you push this video higher up on the algorithm. You're just sitting there having an aneurysm and a stroke at the same time. And you know what? In this hypothetical, who wins, huh? Who wins? Who wins? Alright, I actually gotta get through this list. So now I present the top 5 busts of all time. Number 5. Ovelia.
Ovelia is a 3 CP water backup with Job Princess category Final Fantasy Tactics. The card contains 1 auto ability and 1 special ability. The auto ability reads, when a category Final Fantasy Tactics board you control is put from the field into the break zone, draw 1 card. This effect will trigger only once per turn. And her special ability is Igest, with the cost of activation being pitch and Ovelia and all in the backup. Choose 1 forward you control. Until the end of the turn it gains haste. And when this forward is put from the field into the break zone, play this forward from the break zone onto the field. Dull.
Ovelia, feast your eyes on
a new car!
gotta do like 4 more of these gimmicks.
Alright, now the auto isn't really something to write home about. I mean, it is nice to have. We will take it. I'd rather have it than not, right? Incidental card draw is good no matter how you slice it. And over the course of a game, Ovelia is probably going to be able to pay for itself and then some. However, it's actually her special that got people's imagination running wild. It's a flicker ability. Well, it's a conditional flicker ability. In order for it to proc, the forward needs to go into the break zone. However, it's on a backup, and it doesn't require it to break itself, and it's cheap. It's essentially 3 CP. You pitch a card named Ovelia, and then you dull Ovelia. That's 3 CP. Or, if you want to think about it this way, you could think of it like a 1 CP summon that you can use at instant speed to use onto a forward that's about to hit the break zone. Forward comes back, you get its ETB again. Long story short, it's cheap. Now, immediately, we start thinking about the greediest thing you can do with this card. Names like Nidhogg came out, Veritas. People started throwing out the Opus 12 Thancred. But we kind of settled on another card that came out in that very set. And that card is Agrius. I'm not doing gimmick for this. Agrius is a 5 CP water forward with Job Knight and category Dissidia and Final Fantasy Tactics. The card itself has 3 auto abilities. Her first auto ability is an EX Burst. When Agrius enters the field, if you control a Job Princess, draw 1 card. Her second auto ability is when Agrius enters the field, choose 1 forward your opponent controls. If you control a card named Ovelia, it loses 7,000 power until the end of the turn. And at damage 5, she gets access to her third auto ability, which reads, when Agrius enters the field, you may search for 1 category Final Fantasy Tactics forward and add it to your hand. There's a lot of good text on this card. She reads like the quintessential bread and butter mid-range card. She hits the board, you draw a card which essentially discounts her cost. She's removal on a body, and that form of removal is power reduction, which in most cases is better than just being straight damage. And if you ever find yourself getting your ass beat and you see yourself at damage 5 or 6, you can go into your deck and get yourself another Final Fantasy Tactics forward, including herself. Obviously, you can only proc these abilities if you meet those specific conditions, but guess what? Funny thing, Ovelia very neatly satisfies most of these conditions.
But you can only have 3 of these Ovelias in your deck, therefore making this combo incredibly
Shut up, nerd! Now the keen, steely-eyed viewers out there have already caught on to the fact that Ovelia has the job Princess. And if you don't know, there are a few ways to search out Job Princess. The first is Jegrin, who can search out 1 Job Princess of cost 3 or less and play it onto the field. And that's
Pretty good.
But the second way to search for a Job Princess comes in the form of another card that came out that very set. Sarah. Sarah is a 4 CP water backup, Job Princess, category Final Fantasy 3, and she reads, when Sarah enters the field, you may search for 1 Job King, Job Prince, or Job Princess, and add it to your hand. This backup Sarah, to this day, is still one of the premier backup engines, especially in water. The combination of this new Sarah, alongside the 1 CP light Princess Sarah from Opus 11, allows these 2 combinations of cards to be slotted into any sort of Water X configuration. With the addition of this new Ovelia, it is no wonder that people expected that these combination of cards to be a staple in Water for years to come. Alright, so hey, we got Ovelia on the board. We put down Agrius, she draws us a card. That makes her essentially 2 CP cheaper. But hey, guess what? There's actually a way we can make her even more cheaper. If we got ourselves a 2 CP Beatrix on the board, she can use her action ability to make the next Job Knight cost 2 CP less, making Agrius essentially a 1 CP 9k. Wait, hang on now. Beatrix makes knights cheaper? Hey, Jagrin's a knight. Beatrix buffs all units on the board by 2k when you play a knight? Guys, are we making a knights deck? Let's throw the new Rams in here. He gets rid of 2 bodies on the board when he comes in. That's yet another ETB we can abuse with the Aegis Flicker. At this point, the deck kind of builds itself. Yeah, with basically 2 cards, we've built ourselves a viable tribal deck. I mean, this deck's got removal, it's got ways to cycle and replay that removal, it's got recursion, we've got ways to discount our units and go wide, we've got ways to buff our units and go over our opponent's board if we need to. I mean, this deck looks like it's got a good amount of tools to succeed. And look at this. In Opus 13, with one of its earliest tournaments, and one of its biggest tournaments with 96 players participating, this deck even made top cut in the Xanarchan Open. So I've spent the last few minutes glazing Ovelia, so why am I calling her a bust? Well, as it turns out, Ovelia dropped off the face of the earth before Opus 13 even ended. Now, these were COVID times. Tournaments at that time were far and few in between, with the scope and scale far lower than what we've come to expect. In fact, the Xanarchan Open was a huge outlier. Still, I would wager a guess that even if we had more tournaments or more competitive tournaments during this time, Ovelia still would not have long left in the spotlight. And in my opinion, the biggest reason why that is because of yet another card that came out that set, as well as the rise of another archetype, Sophie and Monks. Monks, being in Earth, had access to a wide variety of tools that essentially neutered all the advantages that Water Lightning Knights could give you. They had access to Mist Dragon, which in this particular matchup basically reads, pay 1 CP and make Aegis useless, or Thancred, or if you're playing that particular variant, Oracle of Light. Sophie Monks had a higher top end and better scalability, so if Knights opted to go wide before Monks does, Monks also had access to the oldest crutch in the game, Shantoto. So Knights found themselves getting outvalued by Sophie, and they also found that playing their explosive bombs in this matchup was a risky proposition. A significant amount of value derived from these bombs came from recursion, and you just could not reasonably rely on your valued top-end cards in this matchup, especially if you knew your opponent was playing Mist Dragon in their deck. Looking further on into the set, towards the end of Opus 13 and the beginning of Opus 14, we saw a dramatic rise in power level to the Tier 1 decks, with the addition of a few staples in Opus 14, as well as the discovery of a toxic 2-card combination near the end of Opus 13 that will see one of the most biggest and comprehensive bans and restrictions in the history of the game. To make matters worse for Knights, we saw a lack of Knight support, as well as Final Fantasy Tactics support in subsequent set releases, which makes Ovelia and Knights just an afterthought for years to come. Man, that's actually kind of a shame. I can't believe Knights will never be a viable deck. Ever.
Number 4. Lusso. So I was out shopping on TCG Player at my favorite storefront, Gamer's Command, when I saw this Lusso and I knew I had to have it. He's a 6 CP fire forward, which is such a big and round number. 5,000 power is on the lower side, but he's just so cute. Job Clan Gully member, so you know he stands on business. And category Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2, which is, in my opinion, one of the best Final Fantasy Tactics games for the Nintendo DS. Look at this cute trash can I got from Target. It's perfect for storing my fire summons not named Amaterasu. This little guy also comes with 2 auto abilities, which is such a godsend. I've always found myself wanting to have more than 1 auto ability on a card, but less than 3. At the beginning of the attack phase, which is my favorite phase, during each of your turns, if you have received 5 damage or less, which can absolutely ruin your day, shuffle your deck and reveal the top card of your deck. Look at this, I just revealed an upside down Cactuar, which is so chic. If it is a fire character, you may play it onto the field field, which is the perfect aesthetic touch if you want to play a meta deck in Final Fantasy. The second auto ability is at damage 6, and at the beginning of our favorite phase, our attack phase, you may search for one fire character and play it onto the field. And seeing cards getting played for free from my deck fills me with such joy that I can't even explain. So look at this cute pumpkin I got from Target.
Oh man, Lusso. What does this bad boy do? This bad boy can fit so many fire cards? Alright, now, in order to understand why Lusso had such high expectations, we have to look at the context. At this time, we were in the Opus 15 meta, and we have to take a look at the top played decks during this meta. Now, the generally accepted top decks are Avalanche, Sky Pirates, RPP, sometimes PP. In fact, PP was actually quite popular during this meta. A lot of people were down to try out PP. People were saying PP was just so well positioned and had great coverage. It was just so strong and hard to beat. And veiny. And at the end of Opus 15, we saw the release of the dual Final Fantasy X starter deck, which gave us a Guardians tribal. I also say generally accepted top decks, and it's because we didn't see many tournaments at this time. So competition was few and far in between. But some of the bigger tournaments that were played during this time were the Toyota Camry Cup, the Bahamut Brawl, and the London Re-Rays. But I am getting ahead of myself here. By the way, while doing research for this, I saw this deck name, and I needed to give it a shout out. Like, this deck needs, like, I don't know, like a gold chain, some ice, maybe some of this and that. So we have ourselves a wide variety of decks that played very differently from each other. Avalanche is a mid-range deck that could swap into an aggro mode. Sky Pirates is a control deck that could swap into an aggro mode. RPP is a control deck that can also swap into an aggro mode. PP is a mid-range deck that can swap into an aggro mode. Guardians is a mid-range deck that can swap into an aggro mode. Okay, trust me, these guys play very differently. Please, you gotta trust me on this, bro. And so, when the Opus 16 set spoilers were being released, we knew that the meta as it is was wide open, and the community as a whole was incredibly motivated. And it was because of the announcement of organized play after 2 years where we had none. And it came in the form of re-rays. Alright, so for those of you wondering why this post was made by Woolard War Aviation, that deserves its own separate video. Bro, I saw this post and I was reminded of the absolute BS that happened here, bro. I literally got the same sensation as losing the game. Alright, back to Lusso. We were looking at potentially the most fire-defining card since, He Who Shall Not Be Named. This isn't a fire staple, but it is a card that warps building an entire deck around it. Now imagine playing this guy, turn 1, moving to attack phase, and putting down a Nail on the board, or Ignacio, or Braska's Final Aeon. We're not just limited to forwards, by the way. Bing bam boom, put down a Sid, look at top 3, put a card in your hand. It looked to be that the possibilities were endless. Okay, so Lusso is on an incredibly weak body, and if Brunhilde was prevalent in the meta, we probably wouldn't be having a very good time. But what if I told you that most forms of instant speed removal in the form of summons was actually not all that prevalent in the Opus 16 meta? You'd probably be saying to me, hey, that's great! Lusso's gonna be running wild, right? There's no chance that Lusso isn't gonna be one of the most top played cards in this meta, right? Right? Remember when I told you that removal in the form of summons wasn't very popular in this meta? Yeah, it's cause of soirees. Madame Adele gave all soirees blanket protection, and Lexa made Madame Adele untargetable by summons. If you found a way to kill soiree forwards, they were just gonna play them again. In fact, soirees were happy to see their forwards die, just so they can replay them again and again. It's a whole thing. And as it turns out, a lot of the cards and decks during this time that were good against soiree were also good against Lusso. Mono Water, for instance, had Machiri and 3 CP Lightning to get rid of him. If Lusso decided to attack into Mono Water, they had a stupid amount of bursts. Soiree can kill Lusso without much trouble. In fact, earlier, I said most removal in the form of summons wasn't particularly popular in this meta, but there is the exception of one. Now, I'm talking about a summon who is so ubiquitous, and the value offered by this summon so absurd, its ability so disruptive. If you were playing this color, this summon is an instant 3 of. It's a summon that would be played in a theoretical Lusso deck. It was played in Soiree, and it would be played in most decks, whether or not you expect to see Soiree or Lusso. I am, of course, talking about Amaterasu. Alright, we get it. I just want to rewind back a little bit to when Lusso was spoiled. Obviously, people at the time did have some reservations about Lusso. There was some clear weaknesses. Lusso was expensive. He was vulnerable to Brunhilde, and the deck building cost for Lusso was incredibly high. But the sentiment at the time, even with all these weaknesses, was someone was going to eventually crack this card. If you're building this Lusso deck for yourself, you're gonna find that this deck isn't very consistent. In fact, Lusso is kind of a hard card to find in this deck. We only really have one searcher for him, and that's Meath. That's it, it's just Meath. Okay, well that's not true. We also have Sid of Clan Gully, but he wasn't in color. And for a deck built around Lusso, you really don't want to put too many summons or non-fire cards into the deck, because missing on Lusso, especially if your game plan is to pump out value through turn 1 Lusso and not seeing him early, that just sucks absolute donkey. You know what the next word's gonna be. And if you don't find Lusso early, then you're playing a mono fire deck with a bunch of high costed cards, and you're gonna be casting them full price like a schmuck. What are we doing? What? That feels so bad, bro. Yeah, it kind of turns out Lusso was dead on arrival. You would actually be hard pressed to find Lusso top any major tournament. I actually did find Lusso top Perth regionals, but it says here that there were 8 participants, and when you look at the Lusso deck, it actually just looks like a samurai deck, and they just play one Lusso. That's it.
Number 3. No.
You can read the damn card yourself! Alright, Null is a little weird. He's on my list of top busts of all time, but I do need to note that Null is not on just 1, not 2, not 3, but Null is on 4 winning deck lists in major tournaments. And in one of those tournaments, he is in 4 of the top 8 decks in top cut. Alright, now, before you all go and crucify me, you gotta hear me out. I have the floor right now, so you gotta respect it. You gotta respect it. Darko Milicic won a ring with the Detroit Pistons his rookie season. Those Pistons beat the LA Lakers with a prime Kobe and Shaq. Hey, hats off to the Pistons, and congratulations to you, Darko. But are you really gonna just sit there and say right to my face that Darko Milicic isn't a bust? He's got career averages of 6 points and 4.5 rebounds a game. His nickname was the Human Victory Cigar. Let's take a look at who was drafted after him. Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, in that order. What are we talking about here? Okay, at a glance, Null actually has a lot of good words on this card. Breaking a character of cost 4 or more is fairly conditional, but
Pretty good.
if you can do it. Imagine breaking a Tyro in a grindy control matchup. That could make or break a game. You know what decks were also running around and wreaking havoc at the time? Soirees and Avalanche. And hey, it turns out their key cards cost 4. Not looking too bad, right? And even if you can't break anything, imagine getting any forward you want from your deck. That's not a bad consolation prize. In fact, sometimes that might be exactly what you want. Let's say you attack with Null the turn before. You see what your opponent does on their turn, and now on your next turn, Null comes in, and you could just go right into your deck, grab the perfect forward for this particular situation, and now you're sitting pretty. And if you can't break anything, or if you don't want to grab a forward from your deck, then at the very least, you can deal 1 point of damage to your opponent. This doesn't seem so bad at all. And that flexibility is the reason why Null made the winning list of Chris Matisky's iteration of the Cast 7 Lusso Mono Wind Storm. And boy, did it take the world by storm. A week after Matisky won Re-Raise Melbourne and the winning list was posted, it saw play and won both the Thailand Re-Raise and the Malaysia Re-Raise. And in time, a week later after that, Ryan Chen would use his own iteration of the Mono Wind list to win the Phoenixville Re-Raise. So why is Null number 3 on my list of greatest busts of all time? Alright, we gotta look at some context here, alright? We gotta look at the context in which these tournaments were played. In both the Malaysian and Thailand Re-Raise, they both took place just a week after Melbourne. Look, you're not gonna be able to do much, if any, iterating to a deck that you just picked 1 week out from a tournament, much less one with such long chains of varied lines of play. I mean, Storm is just not an easy deck to pick up by any means. If I decided to pilot if I decided to pilot any deck just 1 week out of a tournament, most of my time spent is gonna be spent getting reps in, and my priority is gonna be spent focusing on streamlining my frame of thinking and finding shortcuts for the most logical lines of play. And I want to do the easy stuff faster so I get more time doing the hard things. What I'm not gonna do is I'm not gonna fuck with the deck. What if I break it? What if I mess up the ratios? If it works, and I'm not touching shit. Next, when we look at Matisky's initial list, we see him on 2 Nulls, and then 2 weeks later in Phoenixville, we see Ryan Chen on just 1 Null, with a few other win lists in Top Cut eschewing the card entirely. Let's take a closer look at the card itself. If you don't have haste, the card actually only does something every other turn. In fact, in the first turn you play Null, assuming nothing happens to him, you will only see some sort of return 2 turns later. Even Matisky has some thoughts about Null without haste.
And yeah, Null basically did exactly that. Like, if you're not at damage 3, does nothing, whatever, it's blank.
And even if you are at damage 3 and Null does have haste, it might still be too slow to help you against the aggro decks. Ryan also has some thoughts on the aggro matchup.
And then Noel won me a lot of games. There are a lot of people in the room in Florida playing angry decks, like Avalanche or some sort of aggressive deck that I'll actually be on damage 3 most of the time.
Yeah, Null seems really crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that matchup is still very bad.
I'm assuming just because of they can just rush you down so quickly, and you obviously want to get
yeah.
But I think the biggest indictment on Null is when we look a year later to the 2023 World Championships and we look at the winning Mono Wind Storm list piloted by Alex Hancock's. There is Null sign of Null anywhere. And to this day, Null sees basically no play in a competitive setting. And the reasons are clear. Null is too clunky. It takes too long for the card to derive any value. And aggro isn't just gonna sit there and wait for Null to generate value for its owner as the game goes on. Unlike for what seems to be every Shonen Jump villain who just stands there patiently while the main character powers up and the main character has to say the name of the attack that they're using. And the attack needs to be charged up and he's like monologuing and stuff. He's like, I'm doing this for my family. And the villain's standing there smirking like they're letting it happen. Ain't no way this is gonna come back and bite me in the ass. There's no way this doesn't work out for me.
Number 2. Hien.
I made a comment earlier on in the video about certain cards being busts that I would like to double down on. If I have hurt anyone out there, I can't tell you how much I say from the bottom of my heart. I am so very, very not sorry. I pride myself and think of myself as a man of filth, as Hien swings for game because he has haste from having 5 or more fire and or category 14 characters on the board. I don't know if I'm going to be sleeving up cards again. I mean, Hien is a 4 CP fire forward with Job Samurai and category 14. I don't know if I can play any deck other than Samurai again. I want to apologize to my teammates at Gamers Command. I'm playing a shit deck once again. I want to apologize for the people that print my jerseys. No, I'm not Sydney or Key, but I know I do look like them. For anybody I've offended here tonight, I can't tell how deeply I don't care. This is exactly who I am, and it always has been. And I like to think that maybe I could also win a few games with Hien's auto ability that reactivates all category 14 forwards I control when Hien attacks, and lets those forwards attack twice in a turn. Also, I'm really old and my sciatic is acting up. Hien, bro. This guy was hailed as a savior. The card that will finally bring Samurai back into the light. In that very set as well also came Gosetsu and a bunch of other Samurai support, but Hien was the crowning jewel. In fact, screw Samurai. Some people were trying to make an OTK deck consisting of mostly category 14 forwards along with Xenos. And honestly, it was pretty sick. Didn't work out, but the concept was pretty sick. And looking at the card, you understand why. Hien just says, go, 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 you got the green light. Now, here's the thing. Attacking in the Final Fantasy trading card game can be pretty dicey at times. You need to worry about EX bursts, you need to worry about combat tricks, and most other generally unpleasant stuff. Not even including whether or not you can even swing over their board. And although 8,000 power isn't anything to sneeze at, 9,000 is really where that sweet spot is. So, how the heck is Hien gonna be swinging into an established board? Well, for Samurais, we need to look no further than to Hien. So what does Hien do? Well, he's got a good amount of text on him, but right now we only care about this part, which reads, when a job samurai or a card named samurai you control attacks, deal 1,000 damage for each job or card named samurai you control to all the forwards your opponent controls. So let's say you got yourself 2 samurai backups and 1 samurai forward that was on the field before this turn, and your opponent's got a bunch of 9Ks on their board. What you can do is you can play Hien, use his first auto ability, and it's a nifty one, but you can get any job samurai or card named samurai, put it into your hand, backups included. You just can't search himself. Use that, get yourself a Hien, play Hien, who now has haste, party attack with Hien and the 1 samurai forward that you had on the board already, and now you do a 5k cleave twice onto your opponent's board. Yes, that's how it works. No, they do not have a window to block. If caught unaware, and if the setup is there, this can be a very potent 2-card combo that can possibly clear your opponent's board. Not to mention, if you're the person playing against Hien, you really need to be aware of how much damage you've taken over the course of the game. And you especially need to be aware of whether or not your opponent has another category 14 forward on the board, because if they do, and a Hien comes down on their turn, and you don't have any instant speed removal, you are literally going 0 to 4 in the blink of an eye. And it turns out this set, they printed 2 more Job Samurai forwards that are category 14. So what have we just done here? We've established that Hien for samurais is potentially a trend setter, a maverick for the samurai archetype. And in this country, we love our mavericks. I am going to kill my... So what's wrong with Hien? In fact, we need to ask ourselves another question. What's wrong with Samurai? I mean, they've got themselves a big boss monster and card value in Tenzin. They've got scaling in the form of Samurai backups. They've got recursion. They've got single target removal and board clear. They've got combat tricks. They're in color for Amaterasu. And now they've got themselves a high quality finisher. I mean, there's no way an archetype like this can't eke out a major tournament win. If Samurai can't win this set, then we gotta do some Sudoku. And you know what? In the first major tournament of Opus 17, Samurai actually had a really good showing. 3 Samurai players made it to top 16 in that tournament, which was tied for top representation in Top Cut. However, there was just one problem. Yeah, Matiski brought out Storm, and Storm right now was solidified as the best deck in the format and the deck to beat. And trust me guys, Samurai didn't have a great matchup into Storm. In fact, I am going to give you guys the TLDR golden rule of the Opus 17 meta. In Opus 17, if you are playing a deck that wants to play backups and you match up into Storm, you are losing. QED. Samurai wants to build their backups so they can further scale their Cyan Cleave. But if you're playing the first few turns of this game like a gentleman against Storm, you are giving them the opportunity to do the same thing. Any turn that you are not going face is a turn Storm is happy with putting down backups and crafting their hand. And boy, oh boy, are there few things in Final Fantasy that is harder to stop than a Storm player with a full grip. And when you're ready to start putting down some forwards to start swinging away at their board, you have just given Storm the green light. Lusso is about to take you through the spin cycle and he's setting that dial up to 11. Hey, bing bam boom, cast 1 Rosa, cast 2 Azana, cast 3 Lulu, cast 4 Alexander, cast 5 Lusso, cast 6 Chocobo, cast 7 Lusso again. Hey, where'd your board go? And if you are casting 7 cards in one turn, a few of them are bound to be forwards. And although Storm isn't meant to be a deck that kills you in one turn, you better believe they got some OTK in that DNA. And look, I'm not saying the matchup is impossible for Samurai to win. In fact, Samurai have a line where if you're going first, you can go Cyan and a category 14 forward turn 1, Hien turn 2, and now you're threatening lethal turn 3. It's actually kind of a sick line. But 3 things about this. 1, you're not always going to see this line or this hand. 2, you can only take this line if you know the other person is on Storm. I mean, imagine this. You do this in Swiss randomly, not knowing what your opponent is playing. Cyan Gosetsu turn 1, and your opponent decides to go Shinju Elvis? 3. There were other aggro decks in the format that were much more consistent and theoretically had a much better matchup, but somehow, even then, Storm still found its way topping and winning tournaments during the entirety of this opus. Now, hang on. I am not going to sit here and tell you that Samurai did not win any major tournaments this set, okay? That would make me a liar. Samurai actually did win Australian Nationals, and that deck was piloted by Chris Matiski in a 2-deck format, with his other deck being Storm. Now, in a 2-deck format, Samurai is actually a very strong pick. The viability of the deck pool essentially grows in quantity simply because everyone is looking for another viable deck to play. Samurai is usually played as one color, and that allows for your second deck to have access to a much larger card pool. But we have been shown time and time again that in a 1-deck format, Samurai didn't have what it takes to get over the hump against Storm. And you know, despite that, we still saw Samurai continue to get decent representation from the beginning through to the end of the entire Opus 17 format. We saw Samurai make top cut in Melbourne, Singapore, France, Japan, Italy, Sydney, Canada, Benelux, San Diego, and this place, Glasgow. Your doll sells the Avon! And for those reasons, we see indicators that Samurai as an archetype had genuine hype, excitement, support, fans throughout all of Opus 17. But we just didn't see the results worthy of such hype. And for those reasons, I gotta put Sam's and I gotta put Hien at number 2.
Number 1. Belgemine? Bagmina.
Blastoise.
Touch my muscles again. You touch my muscles again.
Tori,
very nice person.
Get a handle, Tori. Come on.
That was very
She's
reasonable.
just a 1 CP win for her, Tori. Come on.
She's just casting summons.
Talk to me.
She's just
Then
casting
talk to me.
summons.
Then you
and
talk to
know
me.
it.
She's a job
I know
summoner
it, but
category
You gotta
10.
give us a shot.
You know
you
what,
gotta
Tori?
give
Okay,
Monsters
okay, then
Break
you listen
some
to me. You let me hear what I'm saying, okay? You get your shot. She has 3 sub and the situation. You know the situation,
Just put
Tori.
removal in the form of a summon.
Because that makes it worse. That makes it worse, Tori. She can't be targeted by any summons.
Nothing to Storm. Nothing.
Okay, that I can't control. They have to cast 2 summons in order to deal 4,000
She
damage to
used
2
the
forwards.
Sora.
And she has 3 summons in her hand. So
just
when
came
she
back
casts
with
3
a
summons,
Break
3 of your forwards are getting bottom
She
decked.
just
I'm telling you,
back
our
with the
ass is
Break
in
Zone with the
jackpot
Sora.
now,
How
okay?
does that work?
Okay. I'm just letting you know that. Now, Benedict Cumberbatch and 9/11 have one thing in common. Every single person knows exactly where they were when they heard the news. Don't believe me? Hey, Zach, where were you?
Me? Gungaga.
So where was I when Butt Fumble was spoiled? Well, I'll have you know that at that time, I was at North American Nationals.
That's right. It's no secret that a caliber of my player was competing in the most prestigious tournament in the land. My competition was few, but my victims were many. If you didn't see me that day, I'm not surprised. Face it, I'm way above your pay grade.
Yeah, so I was licking my wounds when it happened. There was an announcement, a notification on our phones. A new spoiler, some people whispered. Anticipation filled the air. One by one, the faint lights from our phones touched each and every one of our faces. What we were looking at that day was a herald, a harbinger of a deck and elements long dormant. For some people in that room, Butt Dial was offering salvation, but for the rest of us, we were looking at the progeny, the natural successor to one of the most feared and dominant control decks of all time. Cast Count Storm. Getting real tired talking about Storm, actually. Beetlejuice looked to be an insane example of power creep in the game and a clear upgrade to 1 CP Lusso. I mean, casting 3 cards is significantly easier than casting 7, and the nature of her removal can mostly be considered an upgrade compared to damage, power reduction, and straight break abilities. And the reason being is that there were some cards in the format that were somewhat difficult to get rid of, such as Yuzuki and Rydia. These 2 cards you would have a difficult time getting rid of with straight damage. Kalmia is another card that could give someone trouble, especially if their primary form of removal was power reduction. However, there are no forwards in the format that are immune to getting bottom deck. Also, this form of removal prevents the forwards you remove from hitting the break zone, which makes recursion a little bit less effective, especially if your opponent is sitting on a Arc or a Kusith in hand. She has protection from targeted summons, she has somewhat relevant text for being Job Summoner, and much more relevant text for being Category 10. Storm as a deck already plays a searcher for her in the form of Stiltskin, and it would be trivial to add another searcher in the form of Brother. Heck, you might as well throw the entire Category 10 backup engine in there as well. And even though Bufflant does have a measly low power of 3000, even if she does get removed, the wind element actually does have good recursion in the form of Asura, which is already a staple in Storm. That night, during dinner, all anyone could talk about at that table was how to break this card. The number 69 got thrown around. We can use the second cast 4K ping on this guy and someone else, and then use this action ability to deal 7,000 damage to your opponent's board, easy peasy. How about we just take Lusso out from the deck entirely? Go 3 up on Lulu, add in a Citra, a few more summons, call it a day. If we decided to splash some water in there, we get access to some more cantrips and some summon recursion. The possibilities were endless. Everyone at that table thought that this lady and her stupid Samus Ball cosplay was gonna terrorize us all next set. It was equal parts anticipation and equal parts trepidation. So what happened? Well, as it turns out, even though Bag of Dicks was in theory an upgrade to Lusso, the meta as a whole just wasn't a very friendly environment for the deck to thrive. Aggro decks were as popular as ever, and we had quite a few of them running around. We had knights threatening to dull freeze your backups and your forwards while pummeling your face in. Wool 7 hit you with, oftentimes, untargetable forwards while having a high-end finisher in the form of Gilgamesh waiting in the rear. But the true boogeyman of this set was Chaos. Now, Chaos, the deck, honestly deserves its own video. The conception of this deck and the many forms and evolutions this deck took, slowly becoming more and more optimized as the season went on, is just a genuinely fascinating topic. And me personally, I just can't do it justice. So you'll just have to take my word for it when I say,
This guy fucks. Thank you.
Chaos was just so oppressive to play against. I mean, right from the get-go, they're just taking 2 cards away from your hand while you're staring down 3 forwards looking to go face, and you've taken 3 points of damage already, and they can do this on turn 1! You haven't played a single card yet! This deck was as close to a Yu-Gi-Oh deck as they come, and I mean that in a bad way. Other decks at this time was teched out to the gills to deal with Chaos. We were throwing in as many EX bursts as we could into our decks. We had to play break zone removal. Some of us was splashing lightning just so we could play X-Death in our decks. But here's the thing about Chaos. You can tech as much as you like, but sometimes Chaos just hits all those tech cards that you painstakingly made room for right into damage, and then there goes all of your preparation right down the drain. Now that's not the only issue Butterfingers had. You see, at this point in time there was another premier control deck running around, and that deck was Refia. Now Refia at one point was widely considered the best deck in the format, and the history of Refia probably deserves its own video as well. And although at this point it was not considered the best deck anymore, it was still a tier 1 or tier 0 deck. It was still very potent, and it was going to be well represented in any room you play in. Now, as a control deck, Refia really wanted to play backups. But do you remember what I said earlier about decks that play backups losing to Storm? Well, things kinda changed. You see, while Storm still does have an edge against any decks that rely on playing backups, what we found was that the Storm Refia matchup was basically a 50-50. Now why is that? Well, the reason why is because of 2 stupid Toxic Monkey Boys. Both of these Zidanes are played in their respective decks, and their purpose? To disrupt your opponent and generate card advantage against a control deck or mirror matchup. How these Zidanes disrupt your opponent differs in practice. The 2CP Wind Zidane removes the top card of your opponent's deck every time he enters the field or attacks, and every card he removes can be cast by you at the card's appropriate time without having to worry about paying the right color. What this essentially does for you is now you effectively have a larger hand size. The more cards you take, the more ammo you're storing to pump out high cast count turns. Not to mention that your opponent is now losing access to their key cards that they are relying on. It makes it that much harder for them to plan out their turns, especially if they're a toolboxy deck or a tech heavy deck that relies on having 1-ofs or 2-ofs to deal with situations as they come. If left alone, Zidane will strangle your opponent's resources and effectively give them to you. The 2CP multi-element Fire Wind Zidane works a little bit differently. He naturally has haste, and whenever he enters the field or attacks, you get to look at your opponent's hand and you remove one of those cards from play. And when you do so, your opponent gets to draw a card. So if the 2CP Wind Zidane disrupts your opponent by messing with their deck, the multi-element Zidane disrupts your opponent by messing with their hand. Now, in the turn that you play him, you have the potential to look at your opponent's hand and get rid of the best card from it twice. Now, with that being said, you do have to be a little bit careful. If you start taking cards from their hand willy-nilly, there is a chance you can make your opponent draw into a better hand. So oftentimes, what you would want to do is if you don't see any high threat cards in your opponent's hand, you would just leave it be and leave them with a dud hand. This Zidane, when left alone, can also be incredibly oppressive. It can leave your opponents in top deck mode, and having them hope for drawing an answer or an out against this annoying monkey boy is a losing proposition on its own, especially if you're using this opportunity to buy time for you to build out your resources. And that's the thing, both of these decks don't have very many effective ways to deal with an early Zidane. Mono Wind has Dryad, but you need 4 wind characters to actually kill their Zidane. On the flip side, Refia's answers for Zidane come in the form of Amaterasu, but if you're dealing with an early Zidane, then the best case scenario for you is that you're trading even with Amat by paying 1 with a backup and pitching a card, making that trade 2 for 2. But the worst case scenario has you trading 3 cards for their 2. That's a really bad trade for you and a really good deal for your opponent. Your opponent makes that deal 10 times out of 10. Hey Brad, you make that deal?
I'll make that deal. How about you, Udovich? You make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
Not to mention that you really want to save Amat in this matchup for maybe like a Lusso, Lulu, or even an Atomos if they're at damage 3. Using an Amat on a Zidane feels really bad, especially since some Refia decks don't have much, if any, summon recursion. Now, some Refia decks also do run Brunhilde, which is a really clean answer to Zidane, but depending on the meta, and depending on what kind of room you're going to be walking into, it typically doesn't see much play. Now, I am overgeneralizing this, and we are missing a good bit of nuance, but oftentimes, how this matchup plays out is whoever sees their Zidane first wins. They just slam it onto the board and they let them wreak havoc onto their opponent. So, you got a room full of angry decks that you have a really bad matchup against, and the control deck matchups that you historically had an edge against has now become a 50-50. Things don't look great for Storm as a whole. And we also have to talk about the deck itself. 3 is less than 7. That means with Blighttown, it's easier to get your cast count payoff compared to Lusso, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, it's easier to cast 3 summons compared to casting 7 cards in one turn. However, therein lies a downside when you compare Lusso's payoff to Buddy Hield's payoff. You can clear your opponent's board, but how are you closing out the game? You put down Brie Larson. You cast 1, play Dryad. Cast 2, you play Chocobo. Cast 3, you play, I don't know, you play an Asura. Okay, great, you just cleared their board. Where are your forwards? Unless you have an already established board, you might need to cast another 3 summons next turn or the turn after, and therein lies the clunkiness of having to play a deck reliant on having a high summon count. Your bodies start to come at a premium. Compare that to Lusso. When he hits his cast count 7, you're probably looking at 4 forwards on the board after the fact. And sure, you're not going to be able to win the game on the spot or even next turn, and you definitely can't go another cast count 7 next turn, but you don't have to. You could just slam down a limit break ace. Just slamming down a limit break ace isn't a bad way to finish off the game. Meanwhile, a deck built around backshots don't have that same wind character count capable of making a limit break ace a potent follow-up. So I did put Belgium on this list as the biggest bust of all time, but she has had decent tournament results. In fact, later that year in the 2024 World Championships, she made 2 of the top 8 decks that tournament, with her highest placement being 4th. And if you take a look at both decks, they have her played alongside Lusso, probably utilizing her as an alternate cast count payoff, probably during the early to mid game to buy time for the deck if needed. But nowadays, both Bellsprout and Storm as a whole is relegated to rogue deck status. It still sees some play, but it hasn't made too much of a splash in competitive play. In fact, the last time these decks were played was in the 2025 European Championships, where they both placed outside of the top 4. And it is interesting to note that in both of those decks, Bacterial Infection was only played as a one of. Hopefully, I've made my case to you as to why Brain Rot has the biggest... Wait, I started that sentence totally wrong. As the greatest bust of all time. Woo! Okay, well, that was kind of a long video. I really enjoyed making it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as well. If you didn't like it, let me have it in the comments. However, if you did like this video, then don't forget, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, cause you know what? I'm not making another one. That's it. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I can't make any more. I'm done. I don't got another one in me, bro. How long is, what did I do? How long is this video, bro? It's past 55 minutes, bro. It's almost an hour. What am I doing? You think I got any more of these left in me, bro? I don't got any more left in me, bro. What do you want from me? What do you want from me? I mean, I shot my load, bro. I shot my load. I'm drained. My creative juices are no longer juicy.